So recently I've been getting back into old PS1 games, specifically ones that involve eerie or have horror elements to them. I started with the classics like Silent Hill and Resident Evil,
Come on!
but wanted to see if I can find any lesser known ones, and I think I found one. Released in 1998 by Human Entertainment, the same company known for making Clockwork. Okay, I just want to put this out there. This is the second fucking time I called it Clockwork. It is Clock Tower, not Clockwork. I don't know why the fuck I keep calling it Clockwork, but it's not its name. Mazurna Falls is a Japanese crime drama released on the PlayStation 1, exclusively in Japan. This would remain for a solid 20 years after its initial release, only being playable either through various virus-packed emulators or purchasing an original Japanese copy. Fortunately, over the years, it's gained a fan base in the US, even having a dedicated Tumblr page since 2015 for different English ROMs, fan patches, and pretty much anything else involving the game. Now, I'm not the first person to make a video on this, and a lot of the credit is due to Resident Evie, who translated the game and helped create many of the English ROMs used for emulation. She's basically the reason why I even found out about this game's existence and why I can even make this video. So without further ado, let's get into the games. We're awakened from a phone call, apparently deciding to sleep in the previous night's clothes. And just by the way, over the 7 days this game takes place, you never once change clothes. So we're just gonna fester in this Letterman's jacket and pants throughout the entire game. The call is from our high school friend Winona, who tells us our other friend Emma has been reported missing by her mother. Matthew, trying to calm her down, asks to meet up, and then promptly hangs up on her. He picks up a photo taken of the three of them over the summer, rationalizing that Emma was acting strange last night. And something you may have already noticed is that I don't have ray tracing on. A lot of objects in this game are textured the exact same, so it's sort of like that game you'd find in magazines where you highlight things hiding in the picture, except it's me trying to see what I can interact with. Heading outside, you're approached by Uncle Nas, who tells you to follow him inside. There, we meet the town sheriff, Morgan, who reveals another girl from Matthew's school, Kathy, was found unconscious in the forest, presumably attacked by a bear from the claw marks they found on her neck. Morgan thinks this is connected to Emma's disappearance and asks us to come to the sheriff's department. As we're about to leave, Morgan gets a call on his radio and suddenly changes destinations to the hospital. He also requests that a character named Father Barton go as well. Once at the hospital, Morgan questions us about our relationship to Emma, saying that we didn't really know her too well as we weren't as close to her as she was to Winona. Head into the hospital and an old lady named Barbara will ask Morgan for cigarettes. Being wheelchair bound, stuck in a hospital, cigarettes being the only joy she has left. Matthew asks what's wrong with Barbara, only to find out that she's just faking illness in order to live in the hospital. Heading up to Kathy's room, we'll be asked to wait outside while Morgan enters the room with the doctor. We can overhear them talking about how she's conscious, but seems to be in a sort of aftershock, stuck in a vegetal state. Father Barton, the town's priest and also Kathy's adopted father, shows up and heads inside. We then hear a scream and Kathy starts to freak out, dying from what can only be shock. We aren't able to go into the room, but we can see what can only be the amalgamation of 3 player models, all shoved together like a Gmod bug. As we're leaving, we get stopped by the hospital psychiatrist James, who reveals that Emma was having an existential crisis and was doubting her own life. Now make sure not to confuse Emma, the girl who is missing, with Kathy, the girl who just died 5 seconds ago. He then tells us where we can usually find him, in Bar Wolves at 8 p.m. Now you may be wondering why he would throw in that random piece of trivia. This is something that'll be brought up later. We then run into Winona, who tells us an investigation on Emma's disappearance has opened, and then the screen fades to black, leaving us questioning Kathy's final words and the connection between her and Emma. We're taken to the Mazurna Sheriff's Department, where you may notice a couple of things. One of them being this little clock in the top left. Now the game doesn't tell you this, but from here on out, this clock will determine the results of the game. This is also the first major flaw in this game. Since I was not aware this game followed the Dead Rising no fun mechanic, one in-game hour comes out to around 5 minutes in real time. So quite literally every minute counts. But unlike in Dead Rising, where they at least give you the luxury of knowing you're on a timer, this game does not. Now, the way this game works is there are events that progress the story that either happen at very specific times or can happen whenever they're triggered, either by doing a specific action or talking to someone. The game doesn't tell you which or which. I have about 5 hours of in-game footage of me walking around trying to find where to go. And eventually, after about 3 in-game days, I decided to call it quits and restart, using a guide to help me actually progress in the game. Now, with all that information being said, let's continue with the story. Walking to an adjacent room, we find a map, which will be used to navigate to various parts around town. We're then questioned by Morgan, who warns us not to get too involved in the investigation. A deputy named Hudson enters and says a kid named Mel saw Emma at the bar last night. Morgan leaves to interview Mel and suggests we talk to Cohen, the man who found Kathy in the woods. As we head towards the door, you'll see a yellow book on the table. It just so happens that this is the game's way of guiding you towards the objective, as it contains Cohen's address, which will show up on the map upon inspecting it. Now, a couple problems with this. You have to interact with the book not 1, not 2, but 3 times in order to get Cohen's address. If you don't interact with it enough times or not at all, Cohen's house doesn't show up on the map, and you'll have to find it by chance. It doesn't have any discernible textures than any other object in the room, making it not obvious that this is what you're intended to interact with. Now, you may be wondering why this is such a big deal. Well, it just so happens that a major scene used to progress the story takes place at 10:50 a.m., or in real time, 4.5 minutes. On top of that, it never tells you where to go, and even if you're a minute late, you soft lock the scene from happening. Now, other than the fact that I've never been more stressed trying to speedrun a game that never intended to be speedrun, time is a major element in this game. Before leaving, we read a bulletin that a meeting at the church will be held at 1 to talk about Emma's disappearance. After grabbing Cohen's address, we head over to his lodge where he invites us in, where he says the force felt unusual the night he discovered Kathy. He found her in front of a big tree, there being visible signs of a fire that had been set nearby, indicating that she wasn't alone. Now I'd love to talk more with Cohen, but holy shit, look at the time. We have under 3 minutes to get to Emma's house. Thankfully, we have Matthew's Beetle with great driving controls to get us there. And we missed the scene. Time to restart. Fuck. Okay, we made it. Emma's father opens the door and invites us in. Winona, somehow already being there despite not having a car, comforts Emma's mom as she's too heartbroken over her daughter's disappearance to even let anybody go up to her room. Winona, having a strict curfew by her father, asks us for a ride home. On her way in, Winona talks about going to the school library with Emma yesterday, where she saw her reading a book on philosophy. Now, on our map, the gas station and high school are added as locations. You can now see why having this scene locked from happening makes the game 10 times more difficult. After this scene, I had a moment to catch my breath, and the guide suggested I go back to the shed to get the notebook. This allowed me to save a profile on every character I met and any phone numbers I find, which is extremely important, as sometimes calling these numbers will allow you to find out where they are. We arrive at the high school and find a book titled History of Philosophy. There is a bookmark in the page reading, "Nothing exists, and if it did, no one could be aware of it, and if anyone was aware of it, they could not communicate it to others." This was probably the source of why Kathy was discussing the meaning of life and death to James. Luckily now we have ample time, as our next event is the town meeting that starts at 1. Unfortunately, it's at the church, which is located on the other side of the map and requires you to drive a long way up the mountain. There we can talk to various people before the meeting, like Samuel, the doctor who went into Kathy's room. He talks about Kathy appearing to die from shock. Talking to Barton, he talks about how he adopted Kathy 12 years ago and raised her as his own, as well as mentioning a funeral in the ceremony tomorrow at 9:30. When the meeting's about to start, Morgan will ask us to leave the room. Fortunately for us, there's a conveniently placed crate nearby that we can use to peek into the room. During the meeting, Nas asks if this could possibly be a murder. Although not much information is known, Morgan says it's most likely a bear attack, but can't rule out a killer yet. Samuel, noting choke marks on her neck and her sudden death due to shock at the hospital. Morgan issues a search of the forest, and Emma's dad exclaiming that Emma is still alive, breaking down into tears. Yeah, he sure looks broken up about it. On our way over to the forest, we stop by Haynes' diner and speak to Lorraine, a waitress at the diner who's also dating Mel. We ask her about Kathy, but are told she didn't know her too well, as she usually kept to herself. Mel then walks in angry after being interrogated by Morgan, since he was the last person to see Emma that night. After trying to get some information out of him, he'll get pissed off and reveal that he saw her last night walking up the hill of the church. He then leaves. If you can't already tell, Mel isn't too fond of us. You can order food if you want, but for some reason, when you decide to choose milk, Lorraine said this strange line that just has no correlation to the game. Heading to the forest, we tell Morgan the information we got from Mel, and Morgan suspects Mel has something to do with Emma's disappearance. He says the forest is now off limits, and when we ask to join the search, we are quickly denied. Looking further into Mel, we head to Aston Farm, which is currently being protested due to the living conditions at the farmer's lodge. Dennis, the owner of the farm and Mel's father, eventually comes out and agrees to their demands. Talking to Dennis, we ask where Mel is, and he points us to the side of the house where his room is. Surprisingly, Mel doesn't keep his door locked, and we're able to just walk right in, where it seems Mel's entire personality relies on his motorcycle. We also find a note saying 9 p.m. motel on his dresser. The phone quickly rings and we hear Mel's motorcycle pulling up. After some terrible tank controls, we hide behind a conveniently placed dressing room curtain that appears to have a peephole built into it. He talks to someone on the phone and says that he's dealt with the Emma problem, and says he'll meet them at 9 p.m. tomorrow at the cemetery. Just as he's noticed the peephole Matthew cut into his curtain, he gets called away by his dad. That was a close one. Around 5:30, we stop by Naz's general store and ask how the bear hunt went. They said they found paw prints and are going in small groups again tomorrow. Matthew again asked to join, but is denied once more. Wanting more information on Kathy, we head to the hospital and chat to Samuel, who talks about the bruises on Kathy's neck not being consistent with an animal. I'm glad Samuel was able to come to the conclusion that Kathy wasn't choked by a bear. We then talk to James, who tells us he met Emma at Bar Wolves. He then suggests we go see Barbara, the old woman who asked us for a cigarette at the hospital. We enter Barbara's room to find Liz, our homeroom teacher, who just happens to be Barbara's granddaughter. We find out Emma used to visit Barbara in the hospital and listen to old stories about the town. Liz says she didn't know much about Kathy besides her keeping to herself, and says Kathy's teacher Holly would know more than her. At the sheriff's department, Morgan still has no leads on the investigation, but agrees to let us help anyway. James mentioned he likes to roam the bar around 8 p.m, so when we get there, a scene plays with James where he mentions not being fond of the bar's owner, Wolf. Talking to Wolf, he recalls a story about a time when a guy tried hitting on Emma, causing Emma to stab him with a fork. He also mentions Emma once came with another person, who Matthew thinks might be connected to Kathy. After a while, Mel shows up and says that he's only there for the milk. This is the second connection to milk in this game, and I don't know what connection it has. A character named Bonehead will then walk into the scene and tease Mel about trying to hit on Emma and remind him to keep their arrangement. Matthew accuses Mel of having something to do with Emma's disappearance, and after pushing us, we have the option of fist fighting an explosion or a mad face, and of course I chose the exploding hand. We're then transported into an arcade-style fight match, topped off with each of our health bars at the top. Now there's a lot I have to say about the combat system in this game, and they're not good things. Luckily enough, after getting my shit rocked by Mel's flying kick, I managed to beat him by spamming the one move I know will actually hit. At 10:05, Winona calls us asking to meet her at the park. Upon arriving, it's revealed that Winona was the one that Emma brought to the bar, who tried to take her home after getting too drunk. She feels guilty for not seeing the signs after Emma asked if she would even care if she disappeared, when we get the option of heart radiating or disappointed emoji. I chose to hug Winona, and she seemed to take it well. After dropping her off, I stocked up on gas. Yes, the car does have a fuel tank, and we finally end day one. We get a call at 5:45 a.m. from Winona asking us to meet at the cemetery, except she means 9 a.m., not right now, so that's why she called at fucking almost 6 in the morning. So riddle me surprised when my dumbass rolls around the cemetery at 6 a.m. just to find she's not there. While waiting for Winona, I decide to head over to the forest for the hunt and am blocked by a cop standing in front of the entrance. I wait until 7 when everyone arrives and am still not granted entry. As I'm about to leave, the cop standing guard steps aside to go take a leak, and I book it towards Morgan. After asking again to join in deliberation from Naz, Morgan agrees to let me join. We wait around in the cabin until Cohen shows up. He says the bear's nearby, and we need to split into 2 groups to cover more ground. The groups are Morgan and Naz, me and Cohen. Searching the forest, we find fresh tracks, and when followed, lead to a tree where Cohen found Kathy, indented with claw marks and scorches around the area. We then hear a gunshot coming from where Morgan and Naz are. We find a deer with his head missing and fresh blood. The head is then tossed from some bushes, and then...
Wins!
The bear seems to have no interest in the injured man on the ground, but chooses us instead, keeping with real representations of bears in the wild. We head back to the cabin, but not before admiring the beauty of nature this game has to offer. Guess it gave up. Oh, what the fuck? Inside, we find a shotgun with shells locked in the cabinet. Smashing the glass, we'll load the shotgun and prepare for the greatest showdown in Animal Man history. Now at this time, I was playing on a Switch Pro controller. I don't know why either. The way to win this encounter is by clicking the coordinating buttons as they appear. However, I didn't remap my controller, so this made the process 10 times more confusing as my brain wasn't able to remember which buttons were which. Okay, yeah, I don't know the controls on this. After about 15 tries of trying to train my brain, I gave up and eventually decided to play this game as was intended on a PlayStation controller. I lost sound. There's no sound playing right now because I disconnected it. Once we win, Morgan will enter and tell us Nas took Cohen to the hospital. Matthew, as you can tell by his detailed facial expression, feels pretty bad about killing the bear. We'll find a tribal necklace it was holding, and Matthew concludes it most likely belonged to Kathy. Morgan then takes the necklace to Father Barton for more information. At the hospital, we'll encounter Barbara, who berates us for not bringing her cigarettes. She tells us it's her birthday on the 28th and invites us up to her hospital room for the party. As expected, Matthew's not interested, but changes his mind when she mentions she has information about Emma. Information she is most definitely withholding from the police. We then find Samuel, who's matched the markings found on Kathy's body with the bear. He believes the bear got Emma because of the lack of body they found, and says that the bear has been given to Nas for disposal. Around 9:30, we head over to the cemetery for Kathy's funeral to find just about the turnup you expect. Winona sees a strange blonde woman and suggests we ask her about Emma. This strange woman turns out to be named Loretta. Father Barton then comes over and Loretta quickly leaves. Barton talks about how Loretta's a bad influence and says if Kathy only had friends like us, she would still be alive. We need to pick up the cigarettes for Barbara, so heading to Nas's general store, we see he's not there, and we grab a pack and a lighter. Matthew, being the good Mormon boy he is, pays for them, because Matthew ain't no Slippin' Jimmy. We head to the church and a scene will play where Father Barton prays for Kathy's sins to be forgiven, almost seeming glad that she died, saying that she'll never be able to sin again, as most pastors do. Around 12 p.m., we head to Emma's house and talk to her mom, where I tell her how difficult it's been to prove Emma and Kathy were even together during the disappearance. She agrees to let us look in Emma's room for any clues. After taking a wrong turn in the bathroom, we examine a sink and find a ring with the initial I stuck in the drain. Emma's mom, having no idea where it came from, says we can keep the ring to see if it has any connection to the case. In Emma's white-on-white room, we can see a vase on the dresser that's completely empty. Looking further into the vase, we see a key inside that Matthew notes he's seen before. Not being able to find anything else, we leave Emma's and head over to the sheriff's department. We'll find Winona there and show her the ring, which gives us no results. Although showing her the key, she identifies it as one of the keys to the lockers at the school. However, we can't go straight there because she suggested we wait so that she can do it with us. Of course, me being the good friend, said fuck that and went to the high school anyway. In the library, we see James perusing the many books. If we show him the ring, he talks about never seeing Emma wear it, and when we ask him if he's seen it before, he'll quickly dismiss the conversation. We try to talk to Liz about letting us into the main building, but she refuses. If you show her the ring, she'll also have no idea. And I guess that's that. Heading back to Emma's, we see Mel leaving from the back of the house and riding away. There was also some other random guy who was there, but he has nothing to do with the story, so I have no idea why he was there. Emma's dad answers the door and asks to speak with us. He asks about Kathy's involvement with Emma and mentions seeing Mel with Kathy in front of the bar wolves. We then hear a scream coming from upstairs. It's revealed that Emma's mom went to Emma's room and saw the window open. Investigating, we find the desk drawer's been open since the last time we were there, and her diary missing. I wonder who could have taken it. Outside, there are 3 people. Talk to the lady with the blonde hair and she'll mention a man named Old Man Perry that saw someone suspicious climbing out the window upstairs, who can be found at the park. Immediately heading to the park, we find Old Man Perry sitting on a bench, who says the man that climbed out the window was dressed like Jason Voorhees, and that he's seen his motorcycle outside the diner. Now for those non-intellectuals, you think that this is just another dead-end scene, but this is probably one of the most important events in this game, which we'll find out later. In the teacher's lounge, Holly, the one Liz told us about, will be there. Talking to her, she tells us that Kathy wasn't very social, but was convinced to join the Full Moon Party Planning Committee. Outside the lounge, we see a flyer for the Full Moon Party that was held at the start of December, as well as a number for the party committee. If you call that number, they'll talk about Kathy's lack of cooperation for planning the party, and when confronted, claim she was rebelling against her father, explaining that the party celebrating the full moon is similar to worshipping the devil, as evidenced by her mentioning a painting in her basement depicting a devil worshipping a full moon. We talked to Morgan about the necklace, who says it was given to Kathy by Barton, but then was taken from Kathy by someone else. So whoever was with Kathy was wearing the necklace, but attacked by the bear. Some pretty good detective work by myself. At around 9 p.m., we enter the cemetery and a scene plays of Mel waiting for someone. Luckily, Matthew finds a killer hiding spot and waits for whoever Mel's meeting with. Bonehead shows up and asks about the break-in at Emma's. Apparently Mel did it without telling anyone. He then asks Mel if he's gonna return the money, claiming that he won't be as forgiving as him. Mel assures him that he's gonna come up with some major cash tomorrow and rides off. If we decide to follow him, we see his bike outside the diner. If you try to go in, we'll stay outside and overhear a conversation between Mel and Lorraine. Mel ensures her to stop worrying and that she won't lose a cent because she has insurance, obviously implying he's gonna do some devious licks. Oh my god, I'm not fucking putting that. Obviously implying he's gonna rob the diner to pay back Bonehead. After the conversation, we head over to Bar Wolves and show Wolf the ring. He claims it belongs to a gang, and they use the symbol on the ring to identify themselves. 30 minutes later, Lorraine will show up and ask if we're here to see a woman named Isabella perform. At 10:30, Isabella will walk out and go onto the stage, only to announce that she can't perform due to personal reasons. What a good use of time that was. But it doesn't matter now, because we have an even more important event to go to. Remember Old Man Perry? Well, if you arrive at the park between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., you'll find him sitting at the bench. If you talk to him, he'll ask you if you want to fight challengers on a one-on-one in the junkyard. If you accept, this happens. Okay, I added in the music. Now, other than the devs putting this in just because, this can be used to practice for the fight scenes and allows you to play as every character in the game, including an old woman, a nun, and even Barbara. I spent a good half hour just rocking my shit with different characters. Unfortunately, you can only face off against Matthew and all the characters have the same move, but it's still wild that this managed to be found in a game that can stretch you so much with time. After that, I headed back to my shack and ended day 2. We talked to Barton about the necklace, who found it in the basement of the church and gave it to Kathy, saying in hindsight, it gave her bad luck as it was worn by that devil. An hour later, we head to the boathouse to meet up with Winona to go to the high school. Once there, we talked to Liz about letting us into the main building, but is once again turned down. Unfortunately enough, since male privilege isn't a thing in this game, Winona convinces her to let us in to look for her notebook. Following Winona, she takes us up to Emma's locker where we find a disposable camera and a floppy disk. Heading over to the sheriff's department and giving the camera to Morgan, he gives us money to get them developed to see if there's anything on it that could help with the case. If we hand him the floppy disk, he'll suggest we talk to Mary Lou, the receptionist at the sheriff's department, who can better tell us what's on it. Giving it to her, she'll tell us that it contains audio data and we need to find an electric organ in order to play it. We head to the print service stand where we have to wait 1 hour for our photos to fully develop. In the meantime, we head to Emma's house and show her mom the floppy disk. She said it's for the electric piano they keep in the living room. When inserted, a song starts to play. The song is called Eternal, and is apparently a song Emma used to play a lot. And for some reason, with no indication, Matthew thinks James would know about this song. This is obviously just a way for the game to guide us where to go, but like they couldn't have thought of a better way. Talking to James, he'll respond to our question very ambiguously and tell us to come to the bar at 10 p.m. if we want to hear it again. Heading to the diner to talk to Morgan, he tells us he's investigating Emma's missing diary when our conversation is stopped by 2 men in disguise, rushing in with guns pointed around the diner. Morgan, being the amazing cop he is, doesn't do jack shit, and on top of the diner being robbed, we're also robbed in the process. After questioning Lorraine about the situation, she confesses that Mel was involved and must be hiding somewhere. As far as where they went, really the only way to find out is from the guide, as besides the direction they went in, the game gives no indication of where they could be. The guide says they're at the farmers' lodges, so I guess that's where we're going. You can find the guy roaming near the lodges, wearing the exact same thing he wore when he was robbing the diner. We need to follow him without being seen. Now this took me a couple of tries because he does a little peek around from one of the buildings, which I didn't notice until after a couple attempts. Huh? He leads us to the back of the lodge, and we follow him inside. Thankfully, this door also has a built-in peephole, and we see Mel talking to Bonehead about the robbery. We're then interrupted by the man we followed and are thrown in the middle of the three. We're forced to fight the robber, who I, from hours of practice in the tournament fighter, was able to beat him first try. Morgan arrives with backup after a tip from Lorraine, and Morgan tells us Bonehead managed to escape with the money. Still needing to find Emma's diary, we head into Mel's room and find it on a dresser. Inside, there are 3 diary entries. The 21st talks about her starting to question her life and not knowing right from wrong anymore. The 22nd talks about Isabella singing, feeling sad, saying how she's being controlled by that man, confirming Isabella being connected in some way to Emma's disappearance. The final entry talks about plans with Kathy to meet Mel at 9 p.m., connecting the paper we found at Mel's. After showing the diary to Morgan, he gives us a badge that indicates we're above everyone else. We can talk to Mel down in the holding cells, who tells us Barton was one of the reasons why Kathy went off the rails. Heading back up to the photo shop, we go to get her photos, but are told Winona already picked them up. Following up on the note we found at Mel's, we arrive at the motel and talk to the clerk about who rented the room. We're denied the first time, but since this was way before the right of privacy, he immediately folded and told us the room was rented by Kathy, and that she still hasn't checked out. Going to the church, you find out Barton has the key and gives it to us without a problem. We let ourselves into the hotel room and enter the bathroom and find blood all over the floor and mirror, with the words Epoch written in blood. Moving the crate between the beds, we find a baggie filled with drugs, Matthew suggesting Samuel could examine it for further clues. Heading to the gas station to fill up on fuel, we get the photos from Winona. The photos developed shows a bridge from the forest with a no entry sign blocking off an area. Winona saying it has to do with some native tribe that live there. After dropping off the drugs to Samuel, we talk to Morgan? The guide says he's supposed to be in his office, but sometimes Morgan's NPC will go off in one of 2 places, either the diner or just standing around outside Dennis's house. I have no idea why he gravitates towards there, but this caused me a hell of a pain to figure out. After showing the photo to Morgan, he tells us beyond the fence is a cave with a painting left by the native tribe. The government asked Morgan to block off the area, but agreed to meet us at the forest in 2 hours to show it to us. Now, me not knowing if he meant 2 hours from this specific time, or the time right now, my ass arrived 2 hours early just to make sure. Morgan takes us to the cave with a painting depicting of what looks like a sacrifice to the sun. Morgan, feeling disturbed and not thinking it has any connection to the case, asks to leave. Around 8 p.m. we head over to the bar and talk to James about the painting. He seems already familiar with the painting and tells us it depicts an ancient ritual called the Death Journey that involves killing someone and then bringing them back to life. Talk to James again and Isabel will come out and perform the same song we heard on the piano.
Ray lights fall from the sky like a stream inside my life. Ray lights surrounding me.
A fan will harass her and ask to fight us after we step in. This was by far the worst fight so far, and he has a spin attack that covers a lot of range, and Matthew has 0 range. After about 8 tries, I managed to finally beat him. Oh my god! Fuck that guy. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck, holy shit, you guys do not know how long that fucking took me. You do not know how fucking long that took me. He just disappeared. Good. We ask Isabella if she knows Emma, and after a quick response, she heads backstage, her bodyguard blocking the door. Talking to James again, he suggests that out of all the options we have, to wait for her to leave so we can follow her home, even knowing the usual time she leaves out the back door. Yeah, are we sure this guy's allowed to roam free? We wait outside until 12:30 when Isabella leaves and goes to her car. We follow behind her, making sure to be as noticeable as possible, and see her enter a dirty-looking apartment. We check the mailbox and see that Nas lives in room 205. Heading upstairs, we ask if he knows Isabella and are told that she lives in the room at the end of the corridor. We also know she lives there by looking through the walls and seeing her sitting down in the void. We try to get a peek into her apartment, but are knocked out by Isabella's bodyguard. We wake up on a bed, and looking around the apartment, we can see a photo of Isabella with a man. The door then opens, and Isabella comes out wearing nothing but a towel. And if you were thinking this goes any farther, remember, this is Japan, where all women, pixels or not, must cover up and be censored by 12 Gaussian blurs. When bringing up Emma, she says that Emma enjoyed her singing and reminded her of herself. feeling lonely and losing self-purpose. When we mention the photo, she tells us the man in the photo is her husband, who died in a car crash 2 years ago. That man in the photo being Wolf's younger brother. After the crash, Wolf got Isabella a job singing at the bar. In Eternal, the song she sings was named by Emma. She'll also say that Eternal came to her as a melody in a dream she had during the accident. Isabella then asks us to leave and not come back for our own good. Until a minute later, you knock again and Isabella will be fully clothed and immediately let us back in. We tell her we want to help her, and she tells us not to get involved in her world, and that she shouldn't have gotten involved either. Before leaving, she gives us a tape with the song Eternal on it, believing there might be a connection between the song and Emma's disappearance. We then leave her apartment, head over to our shack, and we end day 3. We get a call from Winona, and I'm noticing that a lot of these start by Winona calling us at really early fucking times. Like, can Matthew sleep in one time, please? Mel's been bailed out by Dennis. Once we get to the sheriff's department, Mel will be arguing with Dennis, and eventually they'll both leave. Later on, Samuel calls us and asks us to come to the hospital for the results of the drugs. When we get there, he'll say the drug's called Epoch. Morgan, being upset that there are drugs in town, stomps off after claiming Mel must be the dealer. Talking more to Samuel, he'll explain that everyone reacts to it differently, and on a bad trip, the devil appears and devours everything around you. If we follow up at the sheriff's department, we'll be told an arrest warrant for Mel has been put out, but Mel has already gone into hiding again. Talking to Morgan, nope, not in the sheriff's department. Of course, camped out right outside Dennis's house. He doesn't think Mel would be hiding near the lodges again, which prompts us to wonder who Mel's in contact with. Later on, we head over to the hospital and talk to James. In Emma's diary, she writes about not wanting to try drugs, but Kathy wanting them. They go to the motel to buy the Epoch from Mel, but if she got the Epoch from Mel, where did Mel get it from? James then makes a very bold guess and assumes Emma's still alive and being held captive by the Epoch dealers. Bonehead assuming to be the one supplying Mel with Epoch. But enough of this drug talk. We got a birthday to attend to. We give Barbara the cancer stick she requested, which angers Liz, causing her to leave and go to the cemetery. As a reward, she tells us about the time she had a talk with Emma about life and death, which prompts us to bring up an incident that happened 40 years ago. Unfortunately, we don't get much detail as she asks us to leave as soon as we bring it up. If we find Liz at the cemetery, she'll be standing in front of her parents' grave who died in a car crash. Dude, why the fuck is everyone dying from car crashes? Literally, car crashes, death, and drugs are like the number 3 biggest deaths in this town. Head back up to Barbara's room, and Liz will already be there. Unfortunately, that 5 minutes was more than enough time for Barbara to be comfortable telling us to ask Liz about it. Apparently there was a murder that involved Barbara's sister, dying in what the police suspected to be part of a satanic ritual, something Emma was very keen on learning about. We don't get much more out of her as she tells us to go look it up if we want to learn more. So that's exactly what we do. Using the computer in the library, we learn that a man named Cougar murdered Barbara's sister and used her as a guinea pig in order to perform the death journey ritual, wanting to obtain the power of eternal life. After the ritual didn't work, he went goodbye to evade punishment, hoping to be resurrected from the ritual. It did not work. Matthew then has the bright idea of asking James about the ritual, never questioning why James would know so much about satanic rituals. But before that, we go back to Barbara and talk about the murder of her sister, something Matthew thinks she would want to know more about. We learn Cougar was an assistant to the priest of the church, the priest being Barton's father years ago. Talking to James, he claims people who've completed the ritual have lived more than 400 years, calling us stubborn if we try to deny his claim that has absolutely no evidence, and says that sometimes we need to believe things beyond the realms of science and common sense. Yes, you heard that right. A doctor said we need to look beyond the facts of science and look towards satanic rituals. If we talk to Barton about the incident, he'll denounce Cougar, calling him the devil. Asking if Emma could have heard anything about it, says that it's possible, but he never himself talked about it in front of her. Before we leave, we talk to the nun by the door. We'll learn that Cougar lived in the basement of the church, and that he performed the ritual by the big tree in Barrow's forest, the same tree where Cohen found Kathy. If we ask for more information, we'll be told Barton burned everything involving the incident. If we try to enter the diner, the man from the robbery will walk out, and when confronted, starts to run. After catching up to him, thanks to our Letterman's jacket, we get put into a fight that was extremely easy, and get told he's at the motel waiting to meet with Lorraine. Knocking on the door around 8:30, Lorraine answers and denies Mel's whereabouts. After a while, we can see Mel running towards the back of the hotel and ride off on his motorcycle. Now, if you know me and driving controls, you know that this was first try easy I already fucking failed, man. Oh, he fucking got me. Just reload it. Just reload it. You only need to hit him about 3 times, and after the 3rd time, he crashes and is taken to the sheriff's department. There, we talk to Winona and Morgan, where Mel admits to buying drugs from Bonehead, who Kathy introduced him to. Kathy, being too scared herself to buy the drugs, had Mel do it for her. They all met at the hotel on the 23rd, where Mel gave them the drugs, but claims he wasn't with them the following night. He'll tell us Kathy knew Bonehead through Isabella, since he used to be Isabella's driver. We try to find Isabella at the bar, but are told by Wolf she's taking a break from performing due to exhaustion. We head to her apartment to see if she's there, but get no response. If you knock on Naz's door, he does the responsible thing and suggests we simply use an air vent to break into her apartment. Some really great character building there, human. So of course Matthew, being the reasonable man he is, uses another apartment's air vent to get into Isabella's apartment. Once inside, we find it ransacked with furniture moved all over the place, as well as a photo of a cabin in the woods. If we step outside, we'll see the stalker from yesterday. Now the scene is supposed to have us chase after them, but since the game is the way it is and I'm using an emulator, the scene just plays as Matthew phasing through them and running away. After catching up to him and some good old threat of violence, he'll mention one time seeing her come out of the junkyard. And with the game showing us what might be the most unhelpful angle possible, we head to the junkyard. Once there, we head inside a bus and find a destroyed interior with the words "Make me innocent" written on the floor. Lifting up a nearby seat, we find a huge stash of Epoch, and while trying to leave, Matthew's dumbass decides to pet the guard dog. And here starts the most frustrating part of the game. I cannot put into words how annoying this part was. Come on, Matthew Heisman. Okay. The fucking controls on this are so bad. I literally hit that, but alright. The tank controls mixed with Matthew only being able to tank 4 hits until he dies makes you question why Matthew has that Letterman's jacket in the first place. Make it to that fucking door, Matthew! Matthew! You are the slowest fucking runner in history! Come on! An hour later, we appear at the entrance of the junkyard with a deputy standing guard. Now, remember when I mentioned how this game likes to softlock you? Well, this is one of those instances. In order to pass the deputy, you need to show him the badge that Morgan gave you, which you can only get by showing him Emma's diary. If you didn't do this, then you don't get the badge and you pretty much lock yourself from getting the good ending. He'll agree to let us in after some convincing from Hudson. Oh yeah, this is Hudson, by the way. I've only mentioned him once in passing in the very beginning, but he's also a police officer, just not as important as Matthew. After talking to Morgan, Hudson will walk in and say the junkyard's owner is listed as Dennis. Morgan asks to bring him in for questioning tomorrow, and we end day 4. It took me a couple days to realize this, but we never see any Christmas decorations. Like, this game takes place on Christmas, and we never once see any, like, Christmas trees or Christmas lights or anyone barely addressing that it's Christmas. It's just really depressing. I mean, you'd think a game that has, like, drugs and satanic rituals and murder and shit would have, like, you know, some fun decorations. But no, besides snow, this game could be literally set in fucking August. I mean, maybe it's keeping in tradition with the show it's based on. I mean, I tried looking up Twin Peaks Christmas to see if I could find anything, and I just found this weird-ass stop-motion commercial.
Ho, ho, ho! Season's greetings from Agent Cooper and the gang, and all those Douglas firs up here in Twin Peaks.
We wake up bright and early to talk to Morgan at the sheriff's department, only to be stopped by Mary, who says Morgan is still questioning Dennis. They both emerge, and it seems Morgan didn't get much out of Dennis, saying he had no knowledge of Epoch. We suggest searching his house for answers, but since Morgan couldn't be fucked, he throws the idea away. He then asks Mary to update the whiteboard with all the new developments. Thankfully, there's no restriction on where anybody can go in this game, so we're just able to walk right in. The board shows a map of the town and all the locations we've been thus far. After explaining all of them, we come to the conclusion that all 3 locations where we found Epoch, the junkyard, apartment building, and farmer's lodge, are all owned by Dennis. Apparently nobody here came to this conclusion. We ask if Dennis owns any more land and are told he owns a small cabin on the other side of the shore, the one from the photo we found in Isabella's apartment. Apparently Matthew decided the police are no help because he keeps what he found to himself and heads over to rent a boat. We head into the boathouse and talk to the guy behind the bar, asking to rent a boat. He refuses, saying that they're currently undergoing winter maintenance. Isabel will call Matthew, asking to show the man her ring. Show him the ring and he'll admit some dangerous looking people showed up and told him not to rent out any boats. He eventually agrees to rent you one, but before we can get on it, we have to wait for a call from Winona. Winona will ask Matthew to meet her at the boathouse. Oh, how convenient. Head through the back and Winona will give you a note she found by searching Kathy's locker. The note is written on the back of a Wolves flyer, showing Kathy and Emma plan to meet on the 24th at the forest. There's also a phone number written on it, although the last digit is erased. By process of elimination, we call it and it connects us to Samuel's office at the hospital, showing that Kathy's connected to Samuel in some way, which doesn't seem too surprising considering the guy's constantly asking Matthew to talk about him with minors. We get in the boat and start rowing across the lake. Luckily, a conveniently placed barrel will be there so you can look inside the window. Isabella's been held prisoner by an unnamed man. He says that he can't let Isabella go free in case the police finds out about her, saying it's her fault since she's the one that got Kathy and Emma involved, as well as saying he's getting tired of babysitting both her and that girl you know well. He steps outside to change shifts and Matthew just walks right in. I don't even think that door is locked. As they're about to leave, he comes back and Matthew does what he does best and challenges him to a fight. Now supposedly, Sandman's supposed to be the toughest fighter in the game, but it's not like there's even a tougher fighter that would cause me to almost quit the game or something like that. I mean, that would be like fucking crazy, right? We win the battle and grab Isabella, but before he can get on, Isabella stops and tells Matthew that Emma is still alive. Just then, Sandman shoots Isabella from behind. A scene plays automatically showing Isabella being taken away by an ambulance, and we end back up at the boathouse, Matthew urging Morgan to arrest Dennis and find out where Emma's being held. But Morgan gets a phone call saying Sandman escaped. Do the police in this game just not own handcuffs? Why is it that they haven't forcefully apprehended anyone in this game once? Literally, everyone they've ever caught just goes willingly with them. Morgan then ends the call and tells Matthew that Dennis shot himself. Number 1 sheriff, ladies and gentlemen. If we head to Aston Farm and talk to the deputy outside Dennis's, Morgan emerges from the house. Apparently Dennis left a note admitting to supplying Epoch, however doesn't mention Emma. Morgan says he's going to the hospital to check on Isabella and asks Matthew to come to the station later. If we confront Samuel about the note Winona found, he'll admit he tried to hit on Kathy and her friend once at a bar and gave her his number. The other girl being Loretta, the girl from Kathy's funeral who Samuel says works at the taco van. If we try and get an update on Isabella, Samuel will come out and explain she's alive, but won't know when she'll wake up. If we follow up with Morgan at the station, we'll find him down at the holding cells, where he tells Mel that Dennis is dead. Mel, refusing to believe his father would have the guts to do it, eventually gives in and breaks down, leaving with Hudson to see the body. Matthew and Morgan discuss that Mel had to have had no idea his father was involved. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for taking Isabella captive. Unfortunately, all there is to do now is to wait for Isabella to wake up to find out where Emma might be. We go to the taco van as Samuel suggested, and find Loretta standing out front. It isn't even a food truck, it's just a van that says tacos on it. And she's not even in uniform either. We try to talk to her, but since she's working, she asks us for a phone number to talk later. On our way back to the sheriff's department, we run into Wolf as he's leaving, giving nonverbal communication. Talking to Morgan, we find out Wolf had Isabella move here after the accident, and Dennis agreed to let her stay in the apartments in exchange for finding clients to buy Epoch. Having Bonehead as her driver, sell them the Epoch. Wolf apparently allowed this to happen because people really enjoyed Isabella singing, drawing more people into the bar. Now I had some time before the next event, so I explored the map for a bit and tried to see how far I could go. And it seems the entire town is barricaded off. Not very well, granted, but stopping people from leaving or arriving in the town. Around 7:45, we get a call from Loretta asking us to meet her at the bar, the only place people ever seem to meet in this game. When we arrive, she'll talk about how she and Kathy met at the bar and how they had a lot in common. Kathy talks about being restricted from a normal life due to religious upbringing and having a lot of pressure trying to live up to Barton. She'll tell a story of a time Barton showed up at the bar one time, and Kathy was utterly terrified upon seeing her father, never coming back to the bar after that experience. Loretta will say that she saw Kathy on the night of the 24th, and that she said something strange. But before she could say what she said, the conversation gets interrupted by a phone call. It's Winona, who is heading to see Barton about something she was curious about. It's a pretty short conversation, but before we realize where she's going, she hangs up. Loretta then talks about her dislike of Barton, always looking down on people who committed sins. She then reveals what Kathy told her that night at the bar. "My father killed me." It all started to make sense. The bruises found on Kathy's neck, it wasn't from an attacker in the forest, but from Barton, who lashed out upon seeing his daughter commit such a sin as drinking. Matthew then stops and realizes Winona is heading to the church right now and storms off to stop her. Upon entering, we see nobody's around. Pretend this guy doesn't exist. And we call out for Winona with no response. We enter the corridor and enter a bedroom, with a note on the desk on the far end of the room. Upon inspecting it, we see it's already been opened. It's a letter from Kathy on the night of the 24th. In her letter, she writes that her father choked and attempted to kill her, and says since that experience, she's lost all faith in continuing to live. She also writes about going to the forest with Emma, not caring if anything bad happens. Just then, Father Barton throws a flash grenade at us.
Throwing flashbang.
Okay, he doesn't, but like, what else does that look like? We awaken in the basement of the church, tied to a chair. Barton's sitting in front of us with a gun in his hand. Barton explains that Kathy took advantage of the life she was given, going against God by using drugs and going to bars. He says he was there on the 23rd, the night Kathy and Emma bought Epoch, out of their minds on drugs, claiming he had holy orders from an entity to punish them for their sins. He wanted at first to try to forgive them, but Kathy strayed too far from himself, and towards the devil. We ask if he tried to kill Emma as well, but gets no response. We tell Barton of the pain he caused Kathy, making her a prisoner in her own life. Barton then raises the gun towards us, claiming he forgot himself in his anger, while strangling her, unable to kill her. He then goes on a rant about emotion ruling over decisions. Without them, we'd be no better than animals. He then Fortunately, Matthew doesn't really seem to care about the whole situation, and is only concerned about escaping. After breaking our binds, we pick up a crate and escape via ceiling panel. In the corridor, we meet up with Winona, who apparently just got there. She asks what happened, as Matthew just looks down towards the basement door. We fade to black and see an ambulance take Barton's body. Morgan shows up and goes over everything we already know. I find it funny that instead of talking to Hudson or some other police officer about the case, he's talking to 2 high school students. Morgan says he'll talk to us tomorrow and everyone goes their separate ways, but the day's not over yet. We head over to Cohen's lodge and he'll mention not feeling well, having something to do with the big tree in the forest. We go to the forest to check out the tree, and Matthew will wonder if the tree they found Kathy under has anything to do with the ritual. Is this guy fucking stupid? Head back to Cohen's, and this time, we'll get no response, but the door will be open. We walk in and hear glass breaking coming from upstairs. The door's locked, so we go into the balcony and see Cohen collapsed on the ground. The door will also be locked, but there's a handy dandy metal bar nearby we can use to smash the lock. We'll automatically get taken to the hospital, where Samuel says Cohen suffered from exhaustion from overworking himself and needs to stay for a while. We'll then get kicked out of the hospital, because apparently hospitals here are allowed to close. So we head home and end day 5. Okay, day 6. We wake up at the crack ass of dawn. Hi, Play-Doh dog. We head to the forest to find that Morgan has placed it off limits again for some reason. So I sit and wait for him to show up. He eventually does and basically tells me Cohen wanted it closed and to talk to him. Great conversation. So we go to the hospital, but before talking to Cohen, we talk to Samuel and James. Samuel says Isabel is still not awake and says some other weird shit that Matthew should definitely tell Morgan. We talk to James about the ritual, and he suggests that Kathy was most likely the one that did the ritual since she was raised in the church. And Cohen asked me to get the letter that was in his lodge the night that he passed out. So being the good little messenger owl I am, I went to his house, grabbed the letter titled Project Mazurna from the U.S. Department of Defense, and brought it back. He asked if we looked inside, even though all we needed to know was right on the cover page. Since Cohen used to be a colonel in the military, he was able to read about a case with Cougar and the military investigating the ritual, and decided to move here to find out for himself. He's been trying to find any connection between the ritual Cougar and the forest, but realizes it when we bring up the possibility of a necklace we found being the connection. Apparently Cohen had no idea that we found it. Morgan seems to have a theme of keeping key information from people. He explains that the necklace acts as a guide for the ritual, in order to encounter a great force known to the natives as the Mazurna. Hey, it's the name of the game. They come to the conclusion that Emma and Kathy were most likely trying to complete that ritual, but were attacked by a bear before they could finish. We put on the Eternal tape Isabella gave to us and manipulate Cohen to talk about his experience as a test subject during Project Mazurna. Back then, the military was doing experiments on post-death, placing someone in temporary death, then reviving them with electric jolts. Cohen being one of the few surviving subjects for the experiment. During his temporary death, he said that he heard the song's melody. Isabella said she wrote the song after her near-death experience, this melody being heard synonymously from those passing between this world and the afterlife. We go to Morgan to ask about the necklace, but said that he lent it to James. A police officer gave evidence regarding a disappearance and a potential murder to a doctor not working for the police. Nice. If we ask James about the necklace, he confesses he has it and is currently wearing it around his neck. He then asks us to come to his house at 11:30 p.m., not a.m., to discuss more. You know, I don't like where this is going.
How you doing? All right. Could you have a seat over in that chair, please?
He then asks us to get the necklace from his neck. And by the way the music cued, something big happened. We notice a huge wound on the back of his neck. Ones that look like claw marks. You can tell at this point that Matthew was really starting to understand what was going on. If we ask to borrow it, he gets really defensive and tiptoes that we might be accusing him of being involved with Emma's disappearance. A little later, if you stop by the church and head down to the basement, you can find James staring at the painting on the wall. He says the painting depicts the death journey and was most likely painted by Cougar. James thinks the full moon is required for the ritual to work, the last one being on the 24th, and the next one being tomorrow. Bard may have been able to destroy everything else, but he couldn't destroy this. Now this is a relatively short day as the next event is the 11:30 with James, so we pretty much have the entire rest of the day to fuck around. So you know I did so... 11:30 rolls by, and we enter James's house. He's seen in front of a large collection of books, a tactic many use to manipulate the impression of superiority. He pulls out a book that explains in order to start the ritual, one must take a specific drug to enter a state of temporary death. The necklace is then placed around the neck of one doing the ritual, and the Mazurna descends into their soul, hence the name Mazurna Falls. And Matthew's dumbass thought it was named after a waterfall. James then says he would do the ritual himself if ever given the chance to see if it actually works. Matthew decides to leave out of discomfort, and we head home to end day 6. We get a call from Nas that James has come to visit us in the store. He's come to give us the book from last night. You know, the book we didn't want to fucking read. We take him to our shed where he babbles about not educating ourselves and makes a note that if anyone were to visit Isabella, it would most likely be to finish her off. Weird choice of words, but okay. Now it's currently 7:38 and our next event is at 5. So since it's our last day, why don't we enjoy the town of Mazurna Falls one last time by doing various activities. Alright, well that killed 20 minutes. Time to wait. I decided to phone Winona to ask if she wants to drink milk with me, and get greeted by her father who tells me she went to the hospital. Uh-oh. Remember what James said? We see Winona waiting patiently outside Isabella's room. If we ask about her condition, Wolf walks over and complains about his business since Isabella's absence. He then walks off and Winona tells a story about how Wolf once saved Emma from a guy hitting on her at the bar, being oddly overprotective of her. If we follow Wolf outside, we'll see him and Bonehead get into a car and drive off. Don't bother following them because they just completely disappear after the scene ends. But we do have an idea of where they might be going, which means we have to wait longer. We do some more fun activities and then head in at 8 p.m. What is that thing that just flew in the fucking sky? We walk in and see Mel arguing with Isabella's bodyguard. I think he was supposed to be in this scene, but for me, it was just Mel fighting his inner demons. He's pressing him for information on Bonehead's location, but before he can get anything, Morgan comes in and threatens to take him back to jail. Now, I want you all to remember that bodyguard isn't there, and keep that information in your head, because
that's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Morgan then gets a call that Isabella's awake, which doesn't seem like happy news for Wolf. He takes Mel with him and leaves for the sheriff's department. Winona and I deciding to go to the hospital to see Isabella. We arrive and find a hospital patient dead on the ground. Matthew tries to call Morgan but gets no answer. He tells Winona to take his car and find Morgan, while he goes to Isabella's room. We find the deputy that was guarding her injured on the ground. We then hear the one screaming MP3 the studio could afford coming from the hospital basement. Isabella, tied to a chair and muffled even though there's nothing covering her mouth, is being held captive by Bonehead, who sneaks up and punches us from behind. We find out he's the one who killed Dennis, and just as he's about to shoot us, James walks in and shoots him in the arm. Bonehead then moonwalks out of the room, James stopping us from following him to focus on Isabella. She tells us Wolf is the one behind Emma's kidnapping, taking women he likes and making them his slaves? What the fuck? He's keeping her at Aston Farm and plans on killing her. James agrees to drive us, and we leave Isabella tied up in the basement. Like, we never see her get untied, so we can only just assume they left her like that. Outside, James suggests splitting up and hands us a gun. James decides to check the building, and we get to check the warehouse. Lucky for us, nobody in this game ever locks doors, so we just walk right into Wolf and Bonehead, with Emma nearby. Bonehead, looking to be working out nearby with a gas canister, stops us from getting too close, and Matthew seems surprised to see Wolf. Apparently, he didn't recognize him with his back turned 10 feet away from him. Emma threatened to go to the police about their drug operation, and that's why they kidnapped her on the night of the 24th while leaving the bar. Bonehead plans to burn Emma and Matthew alive, along with the warehouse. Matthew points his hand at Bonehead, Wolf points his hand at Emma, forcing Matthew to holster his hand. Bonehead decides to beat us as punishment for interfering, and remember that fight with Sandman that was nowhere near as bad as another fight I experienced? Well, I spent almost half an hour trying to get past this fight. Bonehead has some of the best recovery time I've ever seen from a character. His flying kick does a quarter of my health, while 2 of my attacks can match it. On top of that, once he puts you in a corner, you might as well just give up, because this motherfucker turns into Sonic Fox, the way that I can't get a hit in, and I was really starting to lose it. It's been 20 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. I can't fucking beat him. I can't, dude. Fuck you, Emma. I lose. I can't. I just barely managed to beat him, and while Bonehead and Wolf argue about their plans being ruined by a double crosser, Wolf points at Bonehead and he dies. Or at least, presumably, because he manages to finger blast Wolf before dying. And you could see I was a little too happy about him killing Bonehead after that fight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. 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 He ignites the gasoline and flames start to appear. We hear sirens outside and Wolf takes Emma and escapes. Picking up our gun, we follow close behind to see the factory up in flames. We run towards Wolf and get put into the House of the Dead style rail shooter, matching the buttons to what appears on screen. Luckily for me, this time I was playing with an actual PlayStation controller, which made it a little easier to progress. After following up the stairs and completing the second wave of shots, he takes Emma even further upstairs where attention gets directed towards... What? What's this? An enemy's health bar and me taking damage even though there's nobody there? Yeah, the guy I'm supposed to be shooting is completely gone, and it just so happens that the buttons I need in order to shoot him are also missing. I was still able to hit the buttons, so I would just spam random buttons hoping that those were the ones prompted for me to hit. If I had to do that fight again... Thankfully, I didn't and was only sent back to the beginning of the shooting sequence. I managed to get past him one time out of pure luck, but choked when needed most. Now, the problem with this is even if I hit all the buttons right when fighting Wolf, he still shoots me regardlessly. So I have about 7 chances to hit all buttons correctly on Blackhand, or I have to reset. Now, that may seem like a lot of attempts, but when you're randomly hitting buttons and need to hit them all right, you need a lot more than 7 tries. After about 26 minutes of randomly hitting buttons, I looked up a tutorial and found something. The buttons I have to press on Blackhand remain the same every time I attempt it, so I shit you not, write down all the button combos from the video in Paint and blindly put them in, hoping it would be at the right time. Thank you, Human Entertainment, for being the laziest pieces of shit ever in not being able to randomize your fucking thing. This saved me. Now, I would like to note that this occurred because I was playing on an emulator. I've seen footage of people playing this on an actual PlayStation, or at the very least a better emulator than I was playing on, and the scene plays fine. Wolf takes Emma to the roof and is out of breath. He tries to shoot at us, but he seemed to have run out of bullets. Pretty convenient considering he never once reloaded during that shooting sequence. Wolf claims that he's become one with God, then draws his knife and attacks us. This is also where I learned that Matthew this entire time had a long kick that had way more range than the weak ass kicks I was throwing before. After beating him, Emma starts to cry in pain from the side effects of Epoch. As Wolf stands back up, knife drawn, he's mysteriously shot by someone and falls to his death. We fade to black and Morgan tells us James has taken Emma to the hospital. Winona shows up and is glad we're okay. Morgan seems amazed we didn't take any damage, even though Wolf literally just shot me. Matthew thanks Morgan for shooting Wolf, but Morgan says he nor anybody there shot Wolf. Matthew then thinks there's someone else, even though he already overheard Bonehead talking about being betrayed. You know, for someone who seems good at being a detective, Matthew really sucks at remembering obvious shit. A deputy then comes over to Morgan and tells him the ambulance containing James and Emma never made it to the hospital. Matthew, realizing it must have something to do with the ritual, decides to head to the forest, telling nobody and bringing no weapons with him. How we even made it this far astonishes me. We then transition wipe to the entrance of the forest. We'll encounter Cohen, who said he had a bad feeling about the forest and already arrived beforehand. Cohen suggests they go to the big tree, as it's vital to the ritual. He follows us close by. Once there, we find Emma unconscious on the ground. Cohen looks around to find out who's there, but is then shot and falls to the ground. The camera then pans over towards James, who seems to had enough time to get his doctor's coat. He uses Epoch and approaches Matthew, taunting Matthew for being so clueless, and I don't blame him. He confesses he's the one who's been making Epoch for the ritual. He also admits he's been searching for Emma himself. On the night of the 24th, James took Emma and Kathy to do the ritual, but was stopped when a bear attacked them, scratching James on the back of the neck. Wolf disregarded James's plan and kidnapped Emma. He explains both Emma and Kathy, being so unhappy with their reality, agreed to do the ritual, saying it was his mission to finish what Cougar started. He demands we hand over the necklace. We threaten to break it and James shoots us in the arm. Just then, Cohen shoots James in the arm with a double-barrel shotgun, one-handed. Emma wakes up and runs off, James running after her. Cohen gives us his shotgun and asks us to go after him. We find Emma crouched down, apologizing for being so afraid. James lying in the snow nearby, struggling from the effects of Epoch. James gets to his feet and confronts us, looking more like a character from Baki than ever before. He talks about how great Epoch is and how it's made him more than human, a being of pure instinct. As he draws his gun, we both shoot each other. James falling back into the river, and Matthew lying in the snow. He lies on his back and stares up at the sky. The credits play over an image of the full moon's glow as Eternal plays. Scenes play of Morgan driving up to the hospital and visiting Matthew, surviving the gunshot wound from James. Samuel is seen talking with Emma's parents, while Nas fights an invisible man trying to shoot his shot with a minor. Isabella shakes hands with a receptionist from the sheriff's department and drives off. Cohen walks up the mountain, standing near the flowing waterfall of Mazurna Falls, then walks away. After finishing Mazurna Falls and not having to stick to a schedule, it really allows you to notice a lot of things human incorporated into this game. Talking to different NPCs, they'll bring up things like the junkyard battle with Old Man Perry, or sometimes just some really unusual comments. If the game allowed you more chances to roam around the map without worrying about missing an event, it would actually be really enjoyable finding clues to new leads. Right here, we find Morgan's house and see a bill with a phone number on it. If we call it, we're told Morgan's at work, but he was mumbling something in his sleep about how the farmhouses would be an ideal place for criminals to lie low. This was right after the diner got robbed, so if I had no idea where to find the robbers and found this, I would have been able to progress the story on my own instead of using a guide. The elements are here, but since we don't have the time to search around for leads, these are most likely going to be missed. The game is designed to be played in such a specific way that any sort of exploration or attempt to do things out of order is punished and leaves you more confused. On my first playthrough, I was wandering around and ran into James, who tells me he's gonna investigate something that's been on his mind. I followed him, thinking he was gonna lead me somewhere, only to have his car despawn right in front of me. Another instance also involving James. If we don't talk to Morgan, who tells us James is the one who has the necklace, and instead goes straight to James, he'll play ignorant and ask us where the necklace is now, even though he knows it's around his neck. Now, missing that one conversation with Morgan caused me to get the bad ending. So the smallest things you miss can be the difference between getting the good ending or not. Another nice thing about being able to roam around is I get a better sense of the environment I'm in. Outside of the funny animations and low quality graphics, there's some disturbing imagery and descriptions this game shows, and all underscored by unsettling music that frequently fades in and out at random. Usually I'd be focusing on driving around from place to place, but if you stop and look around, you're completely surrounded by trees. Since this game takes big inspiration from Twin Peaks, much of the vibe and sense of space and environment makes you feel like you're part of the town. Mizurna Falls is definitely not for everyone, and it really does take a certain kind of person to understand the charm of a game like this. And even if it doesn't have a wide Western audience, I'm glad I had the opportunity to play it. So, I don't really know how to end this video, so here's this. What happens if I speed it up? Oh shit, what the fuck? I can't do... Oh my god, what the fuck?